What's going on, Not Move Nation? Welcome to the Not Move podcast. Today is November 20th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be breaking down tonight's Thursday night football matchup between the Buffalo Bills and Houston Texans. First, I'd like to say thank you to the supporters, subscribers, followers. We really appreciate you guys here at the Not Move podcast. Also, a thank you to our sponsors, BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. All right, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. I'll do the best I can to address those questions for you. So, yeah, we have the Buffalo Bills at Houston Texans tonight. Houston leads the all-time series 7-5 against Buffalo. The home team has won the last 7 meetings between these two teams, and Houston is at home tonight. Josh Allen has a 1-3 career record against Houston. That includes 1 playoff loss. And then Davis Mills, he is projected to be that starting quarterback tonight for Houston in replace of C.J. Stroud, who is dealing with a concussion. But yeah, Davis Mills has a 0-1 career record against Buffalo. They lost that game 40-0. Josh Allen has an 8-0 career record on Thursdays. So if you're thinking about taking Houston on that money line tonight, you have that working against you. 8-0 career record on Thursdays, which is pretty crazy. I have another interesting statistic here for you guys. The Texans, they've played 7 all-time games against the Buffalo Bills in Houston. And the Texans have never scored below 20 points or above 24 points in those 7 meetings. So if that trend continues tonight, the Texans will score anywhere from 20 to 24 points. That includes, 20 and 24. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, last that I checked, Buffalo is favored by 5.5 points, and the over-under is 43.5. Yesterday, I think I saw that line at 6, maybe even 6.5. So, anyways, so the 5 games that Buffalo has won against Houston throughout their all-time history, Buffalo won 4 out of 5 of those victories by 7+ points. And then Houston has won 6 out of the 7 games that they have won against Buffalo throughout their history by 3+ points. 2 of those games were by exactly 3 points. Now, Buffalo is 5-5 against the spread this season. Houston is 4-6 against the spread. So Buffalo has the advantage there. And then Buffalo is 5-5 to the over this season, whereas Houston is 3-6-1 to the over. Speaking of that over-under, once again, I believe last that I checked, which was just a few minutes ago, the book that I was looking at had over-under 43.5. Only 3 out of 12 games that these teams have played against each other throughout history have had a combined total of 44+ points. So a lot of times, 75% of the time, these teams have scored 43 points or fewer. However, 8 out of 12 games that these teams have played has had a total of 40+ points, and it landed exactly on 40 twice. So if you were thinking about taking the over tonight, or maybe thinking about what you should adjust that over under to, if you got it at 39.5 to the over, once again, 8 out of 12 games that these teams have played throughout history have had 40+ total points, and it landed on 40 twice. So, yeah, Buffalo carries a 7-3 record into this matchup. Houston 5-5. Both of these teams coming off of a win last week. Buffalo won 44. Hey, Ivan, how's it going? Good morning. Buffalo's coming off that 44-32 victory versus Tampa Bay. And then Houston is coming off that 16-13 victory at Tennessee. The notable injuries I see in this game tonight, I've already mentioned one of them. C.J. Stroud, quarterback for Houston, out going through some concussion issues. Davis Mills looks like he's going to start at quarterback tonight. Dalton Kincaid, tight end for Buffalo, out with a hamstring issue. Dawson Knox looks like he is going to be the starting tight end tonight with Jackson Hawes in that number 2 spot. And then Curtis Samuel, wide receiver for Buffalo, has an elbow neck issue. He is out tonight. So, overall, I give Buffalo a slight passing advantage in this game. If you want me to elaborate on why that is, I can. But all I do is take the passing yards for Buffalo per game, compare that to Houston's passing yards allowed per game, vice versa. Overall, I give Buffalo a slight passing advantage. And then I give Buffalo a slight rushing advantage. I give Buffalo a good-sized third down conversion advantage, a big red zone conversion advantage, slight red zone attempts per game advantage, a big sacks on the quarterback advantage. Out of the main statistics that I look at, the only true advantage that I see for Houston is they have a good-sized turnover differential advantage. Ivan says he likes Knox to have a good game tonight, so I'm a little hesitant on that. Okay, so Houston, they're a pretty good defensive team all around. Okay, Buffalo calls the third highest percentage of rushing plays out of every team in the NFL. So they really like to focus in on that run in regards to their play calling style. Also, Houston ranks third best in passing yards allowed per game. And Houston ranks fifth best in receiving yards allowed to tight ends and sixth best in receptions allowed to tight ends. So Dawson Knox, last that I checked, Ivan, his over-under was 26.5 receiving yards. He's only gone over that line in 2 out of 9 games this season, right? Now you may be thinking, well, how many games has he played without Kincaid? I'll get to that. But he's had 20-plus receiving yards. So if we took that line down from 26.5 to 20-plus, he still has only gone over that in 4 out of 9 games this season. But if we got that at 15-plus receiving yards, he's gone over that in 8 out of 9 games this season. So if you got that at 15-plus receiving yards for Dawson Knox, 8 out of 9 games this season, he's gone over that. But he's gone over the 26.5 receiving line in 1 out of 2 career games against Houston. He's really played 3 career games against Houston, but one of those games he didn't receive a target, so I'm not really going to count that against him. Another game, he had 5 receptions for 37 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then in another game, he had 1 reception for 14 yards and 0 touchdowns. Now, I mentioned Kincaid is out. And there are 2 games this season that Dalton Kincaid has missed, those games were against the Falcons on October 13th and against the Buccaneers on November 16th. And against the Bucks, Dawson Knox had 1 catch for 23 yards. And Jackson Hawes, the projected number 2 tight end, didn't even play in that game either. So just because Kincaid is out, doesn't mean that Knox is just going to turn into this, all elusive superstar. But to be fair, Atlanta defended against the tight ends well this season. Now, and then Hawes didn't play against Tampa Bay either, but Knox only had 1 reception for 19 yards and 1 touchdown in that game. But Tampa Bay has also defended the tight end position well this season, but Houston does as well. So if anything, I would feel more comfortable maybe taking Knox for 15-plus receiving yards. I think that line's a little too high tonight at the 26.5. And then if we look at how many tight end touchdowns Houston has allowed this season, They've allowed 3. The most that any team has allowed is the Bengals with 12. A lot of these teams, every team other than the Bengals, have allowed 7 or fewer. So Houston, relative to the other teams in the league, have defended against the tight end scoring touchdowns very well here. I don't think Cook has good game, says Ivan. Rushing, I like Cooks for receiving yards. Might ladder him. Let's go check that out. While we're on Knox, I just want to, touch over his reception line. Over under 2.5. He's only gone over that in 3 out of 9 games this season. He's had 2+ receptions in 6 out of 9 games this season. And he's gone over that line against Houston in 1 out of 3 career games. But like I mentioned, he wasn't targeted in one of those games. So really, it was 1 out of 2. Ivan says that he likes Cook receiving tonight instead of rushing. Let's talk about both of them. Houston, really, there's not a whole lot of vulnerabilities in this Houston pass defense compared to other teams in the league. All right. But Buffalo's going to move the ball somehow, right? So, James Cook, over under 14.5 receiving yards is the last that I saw. I think it may have jumped up a little bit, and then the receptions 2.5. Houston has allowed the 9th fewest receiving yards to running backs this season and the 12th fewest receptions to running backs. James Cook, when I looked up this information, it was at 14.5, okay? And he's only gone over that in 4 out of 10 games this season, but he has gone over that receiving line in his last 2 games. And then he's had 10+ receiving yards in 6 out of 10 games this season. His only career game against Houston, he went over that receiving line. He had 17 receiving yards. And then he also scored a touchdown in that game against Houston. Also, this game is being played on turf. James Cook has averaged more yards per catch on grass than turf in every season that he's played in, and this is his 4th season. So, I'm a little skeptical about Cook going over those receiving yards tonight. I would feel more comfortable at 10+. But I think there's a pretty decent chance at him getting into the end zone, and let's talk about that after we talk about his reception line. Over under 2.5 receptions. He's gone over that in half of his games this season. And then he's had 2+ receptions in the same amount of games. So if you like to do alternate lines and, you took James Cook instead of over 2.5, you took him over 1.5, it's the same. He's gone over that the same amount of times this season. And then he only had 2 receptions in 1 career game against Houston. So I guess in that aspect, it'll work out for you, the fact that he's had 2 receptions in his only career game against Houston. Let's talk about his rushing capability a little bit here, though. Houston's done good. I mean, against the running back position in regards to yards allowed per game. They are not probably yards per game, but I look at all around total yards allowed. Houston ranks 3rd best in the NFL in that category. James Cook, over under 74.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that in 6 out of 10 games this season, but he's gone under that in the last 2 games. He's had 50+ rushing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. I already mentioned this earlier, but he scored a touchdown in his only career game against Houston, which he did go over this rushing line in. He had 82 rushing yards in that game. If you're thinking about James Cook anytime touchdown, got a couple of statistics here for you, and that's going to be my favorite. This is going to be my favorite player to get an anytime touchdown tonight. But, I'm not necessarily here to give you guys picks. I'm here to give you this information, and you can analyze it however you deem fit. But, he gets a bulk of his rushing touchdowns when the margin of victory is 15+ points. So there seems like there's a correlation between James Cook rushing touchdowns and blowout victories. He's also had more yards per carry in every season that he's played in when his team wins. This is his fourth season. So if you think Buffalo is going to win tonight, he has more yards per carry in every season that he's played in when his team wins. He also has many more rushing touchdowns when his team wins than if his team loses. Also, Houston's biggest defensive vulnerability in regards to touchdowns allowed is rushing touchdowns to running backs compared to the other teams in the league. You may see that Houston allows, 12 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers this season and only 7 rushing touchdowns to running backs. But relative to the other teams in the league, this is their biggest vulnerability, is the rushing touchdowns allowed to running backs. And James Cook is the fifth best in the NFL in rushing touchdowns, running back rushing touchdowns this season. Also, I mentioned that Buffalo has a red zone attempts per game advantage and a red zone conversion advantage. So when they're getting into the red zone, they're doing a good job at converting those into touchdowns. Yes, Josh Allen is obviously worth a consideration here, but he's not a running back. And Josh Allen also has not scored a rushing touchdown in 4 career games against Houston, whereas once again, James Cook has had one. So there you have it with James Cook. That's going to be my favorite guy to get into the end zone tonight here in this game. Let's talk about some other stuff here. Since we're talking about Buffalo, let's stick with Buffalo here. Houston has allowed the third fewest passing yards to quarterbacks this season. Here we go. I believe I saw Texans give up receiving or receptions yards to rushers, says Ivan. I'm looking at fantasy.nfl.com, and Houston has allowed the 9th fewest receiving yards, according to this source. The 9th fewest receiving yards allowed to running backs and the 12th fewest receptions to running backs. To wide receivers, they've allowed the 3rd fewest receiving yards to wide receivers, the 3rd fewest receptions. I mean, this defense is the real deal. But if I'm comparing Houston's yards allowed to every other position in that passing game, I would say their biggest vulnerability, Ivan, is to the running back receptions and then running back receiving yards. They rank 12th best in receptions allowed to running backs, 9th best in receiving yards allowed to running backs, third best in passing yards allowed to quarterbacks, 3rd best in receiving yards and receptions allowed to wide receivers. And then the tight end position, they rank 5th best to the receiving yards allowed to tight ends and 6th best to the receptions allowed to tight ends. So they are most vulnerable relative to the other teams in the league in that running back, defending against the running back receptions and then receiving yards. Josh Allen, over under 225.5 passing yards. He's gone over that in half of his game this season. He's gone over that in his last 3 games. He's had 209 plus passing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. So if you're interested in Josh Allen, passing yards, there you have it. And then against Houston, I mentioned he's played 4 career games against them. He's had 248 plus passing yards in 2 out of 4 career games against them. A couple of these games, he had 131 and then 84. Passing touchdowns over under 1.5. He's gone over that line in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 1+ passing touchdown in 9 out of 10 games this season. So if you wanted to increase the likelihood, of you hitting that one, once again, Josh Allen has had 1+ passing touchdowns in 9 out of 10 games this season. And then passing touchdowns against Houston, one game he had 1. Another game he had 2. The other games he had 0. So he's had 1+ passing touchdowns in 2 out of 4 career games against Houston, 2 passing touchdowns in 1 out of 4 career games against Houston. And then we have already talked about James Cook a little bit here. Since we're already talking about Josh Allen, I want to talk about his rushing a little bit here. Spears had his line at 31. His line was at 15.5. Tootin had 5. His line was 3.5. Etienne had 19. His line was 14.5. RJ Harvey had 51. His line was 8.5 receiving. That's crazy, Ivan. That's really good information. Thank you for sharing that with everybody. That's fantastic information. Okay, so Josh Allen rushing yards. Last that I checked, it was at 31.5. Ivan says it's at 32.5. Sometimes we get different lines on stuff, but he's gone over the 31.5 in 5 out of 10 games this season, so half of his games. Josh Allen has had those rushing yards. In Houston, really, this seems like their biggest positional defensive vulnerability relative to the other teams in the league. Okay, is the rushing yards allowed to quarterbacks. They rank 18th. So they are slightly below average in preventing that. So overall, relative to the other teams in the league, that's their biggest defensive vulnerability. He's had 30+ rushing yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 25+ rushing yards in 8 out of 10 games this season. Against Houston, he's played 4 career games against Houston. He's had 41+ rushing yards in 3 out of 4 of those games. Josh Allen. He's had 20+ rushing yards in all 4 career games against Houston. And then I was looking at, Josh Allen rushing yards per attempt when the margin of victory is 15+ points. And it seems like when I was looking at those splits, he has a better chance of getting his rushing yards when the margin of victory is 15+ points. He's also had more yards per carry in every season that he's played in when he loses than when he wins. This is his 8th season. Every season that he's played in, he has averaged more yards per carry when he loses than when he wins. So I think that statistic is a little scary there. But he has more rushing touchdowns when he wins than when he loses throughout his career. Let's see here. Let's talk about the wide receiving corp here for Buffalo, and then let's go talk about Houston's offense. Houston ranks 3rd best in receiving yards allowed to wide receivers, 3rd best in receptions allowed to wide receivers. Keon Coleman, over under 22.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in 6 out of 9 games this season. He's had 20+ receiving yards in 7 out of 9 games this season. And then he's gone over that 22.5 receiving line in his only career game against Buffalo. He had 49 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown in that game off of 1 reception, and he ranks 2nd on Buffalo in target share. I also want to talk about explosive plays here in a minute. Don't let me forget about that. Note to self. Keon Coleman receptions, 2.5 is last that I checked. He's gone over that in 8 out of 9 games this season. He had 2+ receptions in all 9 games this season. So if you're thinking about Keon Coleman, 2+ receptions, he's gone over that in all games this season. But he did not go over that in that lone career game against Houston. And once again, he ranks 2nd on Buffalo in target share. Khalil Shakir, over under 43.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 43+ receiving yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's never played against Houston. Khalil Shakir has averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass in 3 out of 4 seasons that he's played in, which is beneficial for him in this game since this game is being played on turf. And he ranks first on Buffalo in target share. Keon Coleman Shakir over under 4.5 receptions. He's gone over that in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's had 4+ receptions in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's never played against Houston, ranks first in target share on Buffalo. And then let's talk about Joshua Palmer here. He's gone over the 29.5 receiving line in 4 out of 7 games this season. He's had 25+ receiving yards in 5 out of 7 games this season. He's gone over the 29.5 receiving line in 1 out of 2 career games against Houston. He also scored a touchdown in 1 out of 2 career games against Houston, Joshua Palmer. And then he's had 25+ receiving yards in 2 out of 2 career games against Houston. So, if you're thinking about taking Josh Palmer, 25+ receiving yards, he's got over that in 5 out of 7 games this season. And then once again, he's gone over that in both career games against Houston. I was looking at his grass versus turf splits and all the splits that I normally look at, and there were just inconsistencies in that. So I didn't see anything that really stuck out there. Hey, thanks, Ivan. Joshua Palmer over under 2.5 receptions. He's only gone over that line in 1 out of 7 games this season, but he's had 2+ receptions in 6 out of 7 games this season. And then he's gone over the 2.5 reception line in 1 out of 2 career games against Houston. Once again, Joshua Palmer has also scored a touchdown in his 2-game history against Houston. And then Tyrell Shavers, he's gone over the 23.5 receiving line in 4 out of 7 games this season. He had exactly 24 receiving yards twice. And then he was not targeted in his only career game against Houston. Over under 1.5 receptions for Shavers. He's gone over that line in 3 out of 7 games this season. He's had 1+ reception in 5 out of 7 games this season. So, let's see here. Let me look at my passing defensive notes here. I'm really looking for like explosive plays. I believe it's only Buffalo that allows, big explosive plays. I think it's through the ground. So let me just double check here. I have in my notes that both of these teams have limited 40+ yard receptions. Well, Buffalo has allowed the fewest 40+ yard receptions in the NFL, which is only 1. And Houston has allowed the second fewest 40+ yard receptions, which is only 2. Both of these teams are also above average at limiting 20+ yards receptions. So I'm thinking maybe yards after the catch, guys that are good at yards after the catch can be good in this game. Instead of those big time, home run hitters. For Buffalo, Shakir ranks 7th best in the NFL in yards after the catch. Dalton Kincaid ranks 46th, but he's out. James Cook, and this goes back to our discussion about James Cook receiving yards, Ivan. James Cook ranks 2nd best on this Buffalo Bills team in yards after the catch, 76th best in the NFL. And then Ty Johnson ranks 90th best in the NFL, 3rd best on this Buffalo Bills team. So I think those guys could be a little bit more meaningful tonight, since we're looking for yards after the catch. And then rushing, Houston has allowed the 4th fewest 20+ rushing gains this season, 20+ rushing yard gains this season. And Houston has allowed the fewest 40+ yard rushing gains this season. They haven't allowed any. So, James Cook, I'm a little concerned. And even with Josh Allen, I'm a little concerned that they break out for huge runs. You know what I mean? I'm thinking it's going to have to be more of a pick-up 5, pick-up 3, that type of game. Just kind of, doing it a little bit more slowly. Now, obviously anything can happen any given night, but, that's where the data's leading me to believe happens in this one. All right, so let's talk about Houston. I'm also going to talk about a little bit about the kicking game today. Punt return, I believe I have a punt return and maybe an anytime defensive touchdown. We'll get to that. What do you think about Woody Marks? Asks Ivan. I've stayed off of him, but I'm thinking receiving yards as well, or Xavier Hutchinson. Okay, let's talk about that. So Buffalo, they rank second best in passing yards allowed per game this season, which is not good for Houston. Houston ranks ninth in passing play percentage. So Houston calls a high percentage of passing plays relative to the other teams in the league. Not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily fit into what Houston likes to do. If I think Buffalo is more vulnerable against good rushing teams, considering they rank second best in passing yards allowed per game, and they rank second worst in rushing yards allowed per game. Houston ranks 23rd in rushing yards per game and 16th in passing yards per game. So Houston's better at passing the ball than they are rushing in regards to yards per game, but Buffalo is much better at defending against that pass than they are against the run. So the first place that I would look for with this Houston team, and they may have to change their philosophy a little bit, is running the ball, man. And keeping the ball away from Josh Allen and this Buffalo Bills team. Keep them on the bench and just do your best to run the ball here. So let's talk about the rushing statistics a little bit, since that's where I would look first if I'm Houston. Woody Marks over under 64.5 rushing yards. He's only gone over that in 1 out of 10 games this season. And then he's only had 60-plus rushing yards in 3 out of 10 games this season. And he's a rookie, so no career history against Buffalo. But Buffalo ranks fifth worst in rushing yards allowed to running backs. I've already talked about how they're bad against the run, but specifically to running backs, they've allowed the fifth most rushing yards. Also, Buffalo has allowed the second most 20-plus yard rushing gains this season. Woody Marks has 2 20-plus rushing gains this season. So he is capable of those 20-plus yard gains. And then Buffalo has allowed the most 40-plus yard rushing gains this season. Nick Chubb nor Woody Marks has a 40-plus yard rushing gain this season, but both of these guys have 2 20-plus rushing gains this season. So I feel like, whoever you feel like has a better chance of picking up a 40-plus rushing gain in this one between Marks, Chubb, or maybe another guy. I think there's a better chance in this game than any game that they've played in so far. Nick Chubb, I think the statistics lead me to believe Nick Chubb has a better chance of going over his rushing line than Woody Marks, although I can see them both going over. But, Nick Chubb just has better current and historical data here. Over under 21.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that in 8 out of 10 games this season. He's had 16-plus rushing yards in all 10 games this season. He's gone over the 21.5 rushing line in 1 out of 2 career games against Buffalo. Back in 2019, obviously a different player back then, but he had 116 rushing yards and 0 touchdowns in 2019 against Buffalo. And then in 2022, he only had 19 rushing yards and 0 touchdowns in those games. But here's the thing about Nick Chubb is that he has averaged more rushing yards per carry on the road than at home in 6 out of 8 seasons, which is a bad trend for him. But I like everything else that I see with Nick Chubb. And then once again, Woody Marks, yeah, I mean, I think this is a good game for him to go over that rushing line. Just he doesn't have the current history here. And then Davis Mills, I want to touch on his rushing. I know you were talking about maybe receiving with Woody Marks. I'll try to get to that next, and then we can look up some other stuff. Davis Mills, I had to look into his rushing yards a little bit here because Buffalo has allowed the third most rushing yards to quarterbacks this season. Davis Mills over under 8.5 rushing yards. He's gone over that line in 2 out of 4 games this season, but he's played meaningful snaps in 3 games. So, and he's only started in 2 games. He's had 7+ rushing yards in the 3 games that he's played meaningful time in this season, and 14+ rushing yards in the 2 games that he has started this season. He rushed for 2 yards in his rookie season in his only career game against Buffalo and didn't score a rushing touchdown in that game. Also, Davis Mills has averaged more yards per carry on turf than grass in every season that he's played in, and this is his 5th season. So, and once again, this game is being played on turf, so that split is advantageous for Davis Mills going over those rushing yards tonight. I can see it happening. And then let's talk about the pass catching here for, and I'll get to your other comment there, Ivan. Woody Marks receiving. Now, Buffalo ranks 7th best. I mentioned that just all around Buffalo's pass defense has been great at limiting yards this season. Woody Marks has gone over the 12.5 receiving line in half of his games this season. He's had 7+ receiving yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. So, yeah, if we decrease that to 7+ receiving yards, you're looking at a 70% success rate this season versus over the 12.5 at a 50% success rate. But overall, Buffalo ranks 7th best in the league in limiting receiving yards to running backs and receptions to running backs. Woody Marks over under 1.5 receptions. He's gone over that in 4 out of 10 games this season, but he's had 1+ reception in 7 out of 10 games this season. So, if you're thinking about Woody Marks going over those lines, the receiving yards looks a little bit better than the receptions, over 12.5 receiving yards instead of the 1.5 receptions. But if you wanted to alternate those lines, the 7+ receiving yards for Woody Marks and the 1+ reception has been successful in 70% of his games this season, both of those. 7+ receiving yards and 1+ reception. I think I'm seeing that you love Marks for a touchdown. Yep, I'm liking Woody Marks for a touchdown score too. I'll get to that here as well. Let's see in my notes here. Favorite touchdown, anytime touchdown scorer for Houston is Woody Marks. He leads the Texans in red zone rushing attempts inside the 20, the 10, and the 5-yard lines. Him and Chubb have also played in the same amount of games this season. So, it's not like Chubb has missed a lot of time. These guys have been, working together in that backfield pretty much the whole season. And, he leads that Texans team in red zone rushing attempts inside the 20, 10, and the 5. Nick Chubb also doesn't have a touchdown in 2 career games against Buffalo. Woody Marks has 2 rushing touchdowns at home this season and 0 on the road. And the reason why I was specifically looking at Woody Marks is because Buffalo has allowed the most rushing touchdowns to running backs this season out of any team in the league. So I like that too there, Ivan. In the past 3 games, rushers have gotten to the Bills. Sean Tucker had 3 out of 4 touchdowns, 34 receiving yards. Achane had 51 receiving yards. Kareem Hunt went over his 5.5 line. Yeah, Chubb. I love Marks for a touchdown, says Ivan. Sean Tucker had 3. Achane had 2. Ollie Gordon had 1. But I believe they threw a flag, so it didn't count. I don't know why I always forget Chubb on the Texans. Says Ivan there. I know I'm used to him being with Cleveland, But let's talk about some other stuff here. I think you were interested in the Xavier Hutchinson prop. That prop was not up when I was looking yesterday, but let's look it up now. Yeah, let's look it up now. We'll talk about Houston's receiving game here. Xavier Hutchinson ranks 4th on this team in target share. Let's go see what his over-under is. I have Collins, Higgins, and Kurt data up and available here. But, yeah, they didn't have the receiving yards up when I was looking at it last for Hutchinson, 14.5. Hutchinson over under 14.5 receiving yards. And then receptions over under 1.5. Okay. Xavier Hutchinson game log. So this is his 3rd year. Has he ever played against Buffalo? Looks like this game he had 2 receptions for 31 yards last season. So that's good history going over those 2 lines that are set for him today. Cool. And then how many times has he gone over this season? Xavier Hutchinson. So he's gone over the 1.5 receptions in every game this season except 1. So 4, 5, 8 out of 9 games he's gone over that reception line, which is good. I mean, I'm concerned about the Bills' pass defense and how good they've been, but yeah, I mean that's good history there. And then the receiving yards, he's gone over that in every game except 1 game this season too. So statistically, I mean, things are lining up there for Xavier Hutchinson. And then, we could even look at the splits a little bit here for him. Turf versus grass. This season, he's averaging way more yards per catch on turf than grass. Last season, he averaged more yardage per catch on turf than grass. And then so all 3 seasons that he's played in, more yards per turf on turf, more yards per catch on turf than grass. Every season that Xavier Hutchinson has played in. And then the home and away splits, seeing he has more, receiving yards at home per catch in every game that he's played in this season or throughout his career. So I think, that looks pretty good there, even statistically. Since you mentioned Nick Chubb hasn't had a touchdown this season, just makes me feel like for him for a touchdown tonight might also be the first touchdown. Now Chubb does have a touchdown. It was against Houston, or excuse me, against Buffalo, in his career games against Buffalo that he didn't have a touchdown. Let me go back and find that information here. Nick Chubb has had 0. He's played 2 career games against Buffalo and did not have a touchdown. It is you may have meant that, or maybe I misspoke, but let me just clarify that. Nick Chubb all around has had, let's see here, 2 rushing touchdowns this season, 0 receiving touchdowns. He hasn't had a touchdown in 5 straight games. So, I mean, I could see him getting into the end zone. I like the Houston running back court. Now, if Houston falls behind and is forced to throw the ball, but which is very well could happen, But let's talk about some of these other receiving props for Houston. Nico Collins, right? Nico Collins leads this Houston team in target share. Last time I checked, his over-under on receiving yards was 73.5. He's gone over that in 5 out of 9 games this season. If we toggle that down to 52-plus receiving yards, Nico Collins has gone over that in 7 out of 9 games this season. He actually had 52 receiving yards and exactly 52 receiving yards in 2 separate games. He's gone over the 73.5 receiving line in one out of his only career game that he's played against Buffalo. He had 2 receptions for 78 receiving yards and a touchdown reception in his only career game against Buffalo, which was last season. He has also averaged more yards per catch at home than on the road in every season that he's played in, and this is his 5th season. So that's good for him since he's playing at home this season, or this game. And then he's averaged more yards per catch on turf than grass in every season that he's played in. Once again, this is his 5th season. Ranks first on target share in Houston. He also leads Houston in red zone target share, 12 total targets, which ranks 6th best in the NFL. So, Buffalo, they've been good at defending touchdowns to wide receivers, but they haven't been exceptional. They are above average. They've allowed 8 relative to the other teams in the league. So if you've got Nico Collins on your radar tonight, leads this team in red zone target share. And he has scored a touchdown in his only career game against Buffalo, which was last season. And I do want to just talk about, red zone statistics real quick, before we move on here. I've already mentioned anytime touchdowns for a lot of players, but, let's talk about red zone attempts per game first. Because if you're not getting into the red zone at all, then there's only really one other option: big plays, explosive plays. Buffalo ranks 11th in red zone attempts per game, but Houston's been doing a good job at preventing teams from entering the red zone on them. They rank 2nd best in the NFL at preventing teams from entering the red zone on them. But, I do think Buffalo, can impose their will on any defense, any given day. And, I do think Buffalo would have more red zone opportunities if they were going up against a team that allowed a ton of red zone attempts. And it's not that I don't think Buffalo will get into the red zone tonight. I do. Just maybe not as much as normal. And then if they do get into the red zone, watch out, because Buffalo ranks 5th best in converting touchdowns when they enter the red zone this season, whereas Houston ranks 28th in opponent red zone conversion rate, meaning they're allowing their opponents to score touchdowns when they enter the red zone quite often. And then on the flip side, Houston isn't as good as Buffalo at entering the red zone. And Buffalo's defense is pretty good at defending against those red zone attempts per game as well. And then Houston, when they get into the red zone, they're not good at converting touchdowns. Buffalo's defense is above average at preventing touchdowns, even if teams do enter the red zone against them. So I think, that's pretty detrimental here. I think, maybe a better now I do think Houston probably sees the red zone a couple times tonight, right? But I think, maybe a better chance for them at scoring a touchdown is that big breakout run by Woody Marks or Chubb or, a rusher, since Buffalo has allowed the most 40-plus yard rushing gains this season by opposing teams. So, Houston, those rushers got to come up with some big plays tonight, I feel like. But, yeah, let's continue to talk about this passing attack here for Houston. And I haven't mentioned Nico Collins. receptions yet. Let's get to that. Last that I checked, over under 5.5 receptions. He's gone over that in 4 out of 9 games this season, and he's gone over that line in 3 straight games. Nico Collins has had 4+ receptions in 7 out of 9 games this season. And then he's had 3+ receptions in 9 out of 9. All 9 games this season, he's had 3+ receptions. I know some people like to, stack 20 different plays at minus, 500 or greater. And at 3+ receptions for Nico, he's got over that in all games this season. And then he's gone over the 5.5 receptions in 0 out of 1 career games against Buffalo, so he didn't get that against Buffalo. Jaden Higgins, over under 28.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in half of his games this season. He's gone over that in his last 2 games. And then he's had 20+ receiving yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's a rookie, so I didn't look much into his splits, and he doesn't have any career history against Buffalo. And then over under 2.5 receptions, he's gone over 4 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over the 2.5 receptions in his last 2 games. And then he's had 2+ receptions in only half of his games this season. So some of these other guys, when you're taking their line down, you're getting a 70, 75, 90, 100% success rate. Whereas with him, you take it down to 2+ receptions, you're only getting 50% there. And then Christian Kirk, over under 11.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in 4 out of 6 games this season, but he has gone under that in his last 2 games. He's had 20+ receiving yards in 4 out of 6 games this season. So for those of you who maybe like to take a player from their normal line, which in this case it's 11.5, and bump it up for better odds, it goes from over the 11.5 out of 4 out of 6 games this season. If you took it up to 20+ receiving yards, he has gone over that the same amount of games that he has gone over the 11.5 receiving line this season, and that's Christian Kirk. And then he's gone over the 11.5 receiving line in 3 out of 3 career games against Buffalo. I do want to look real quick to see, Christian Kirk, if he's had 20+. Christian Kirk versus Bills. Has he had 20+ receiving gains in all 3 career games against the Bills? Because, yes, he has. He's had at least 27 in 3 career games against the Bills. But once again, he's had 20+ receiving yards in 4 out of 6 games this season. Okay. And then we already talked about Hutchinson. I do want to talk about Davis Mills a little bit here. The passing game. Mentioned Buffalo's are real good defending against that pass. They rank second best in passing yards allowed per game. And then they rank second in passing yards allowed to quarterbacks. Last that I checked, Davis Mills over under 211.5 passing yards. He's gone over that in half of his games this season. But he only threw 4 times in 1 game. So it's really like 2 out of 3 times he's thrown for 212+ passing yards this season. He only had 87 passing yards in his rookie season against Buffalo, which was in 2021. He threw for 87 yards, 4 interceptions, and 0 touchdown passes in that game. He also rushed for 2 yards. He's technically averaged more yards per pass attempt on turf than grass in every season that he's played in. This is his 5th season. This game's being played on turf, so that's good news for people who want Davis Mills passing yards over the 211.5 there. And then over under 1.5 passing touchdowns. He's only gone over that in 1 out of 4 games this season, but I keep mentioning it. He only threw 4 times in 1 game, so it's really like 1 out of 3 times that he's thrown for 2+ passing touchdowns this season. He didn't throw for a touchdown pass against Buffalo in his only career game against them. So there's that information. We've already talked about all of that. So we still just haven't talked about Schultz here. And then we need to go talk about the punt game a little bit, maybe an anytime defensive touchdown, kicker history, and call it an episode here. So Dalton Schultz, Buffalo has allowed the fewest receiving yards and the fewest receptions to tight ends this season. So in that aspect, I'm a little worried about Schultz, but let's look into it a little bit more here. Last that I checked, over under 38.5 receiving yards. He's gone over that in 6 out of 10 games this season. He's gone over that line in 3 straight games. He's had 30-plus receiving yards in 7 out of 10 games this season. He's had 28-plus receiving yards in 9 out of 10 games this season. He has not gone over the 38.5 receiving line in his 2 career games against Buffalo, but he was not targeted in one of those games. The game that he was targeted, he had 4 receptions for 34 yards and 0 touchdowns. And I looked into his splits. I didn't see anything that really popped out with his grass versus turf splits and whatnot, but over under 4.5 reception line. He's gone over that in 7 out of 10 games this season. So that's better history than his receiving yards. And then he's gone over that in 3 straight games as well. He's had 3-plus receptions in 9 out of 10 games this season, but he did not go over that reception line in the 2 games against Buffalo. Once again, 1 game he wasn't even targeted. So there is that information for you with Schultz. And then let's talk about the possibility of a defensive touchdown in this game. These teams have played each other 12 times throughout history. There's been a defensive touchdown in 3 out of 12 of those games. The Bills nor the Texans have a defensive interception touchdown this season, but the Texans have 2 fumble touchdowns this season, which leads the NFL, and the Bills are tied for the 5th most fumbles in the NFL with 12. So if you're thinking about maybe a defensive touchdown, I mean, I got to give, just based on that alone, I got to give Houston the edge there. And then Jalen Noel for Houston ranks 5th best in the NFL in punt return yards this season. He averages the 11th most in the NFL. But the Bills have allowed the 4th fewest punt return yards this season. So, maybe Jalen Noel would be a little bit better in a different spot than here today, but maybe he breaks away for one. Now, let's talk about the kicking game a little bit. You got Prater versus for the Bills versus Fairbairn for Houston. Fairbairn for Houston. Okay, so Prater, the kicker for Buffalo, has a 2-4 career record against Houston, for those who are interested in that. And then Houston's kicker, Fairbairn, has a 3-1 career record against Buffalo. Anyways, Prater is 11 for 12 all time against Houston on field goal attempts. His longest is 57. Both of these guys can kick a pretty good distance. His longest is 57, and he's a perfect 14 for 14 on PATs. And then Fairbairn, he's a perfect 7 for 7 all time kicking on field goal attempts against Buffalo, and he's 4 of 4 on PATs against Buffalo. Now, Fairbairn has played 4 games. I mentioned Fairbairn has a 3-1 career record. So he's played 4 games, made all 7 kicks, whereas Prater has played 6 games and has made 11 out of 12 of those kicks. Anyways, there you have it. But that's about end of my spiel. But we got JB Sport Talk that just joined us. What's up, man?
What's up, dude?
What's up?
Nothing, man. Just seen it, had to view it, had to come up here. I just got done with some stuff, so.
Cool. Well, who are you thinking about in this game, JB?
Man. I was listening a little bit. I heard you say, the Bills' questionability of scoring relatively high this game. I agree. I think they're gonna struggle um this week, which is kind of surprising. What's up, Ivan? I mean, it's not really surprising. I mean, they have been struggling. You know what I mean? I mean, like up and down. They're very unpredictable. They're not the same Bills that we've been accustomed to. And Houston has like the best defense out there right now. Like one of the best. You know, um, it's definitely be a trap game. Houston right now is clawing for a playoff spot. You know, they're in the hunt versus Kansas City and what, Baltimore? So, um, I don't know. I see Houston possibly wanting it more. And I see Houston probably coming out top on this. I gotta do my picks. But yeah, that's what I think. I think Houston can come out on top with this with their defense. They can take advantage of what's going on. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, I think they lead out with this. I think they end up winning.
I don't know about the spread. I mean, I would have to lean towards Buffalo minus the 5.5, but I just can't go against the fact that Josh Allen has an 8-0 career record on Thursday football games. That's a trend that I cannot go against. Although there are some other beneficial trends if people are interested in Houston tonight. I think there was one where it was the home team has won the last 7 meetings between these two teams. But the trend that sticks out the most to me is that Josh Allen is a perfect 8-0 on Thursday games. I'm also really interested to see if this trend sticks here. That the Texans, I mentioned at the start of the show, that the Texans have played 7 all-time games against the Buffalo Bills in Houston, and the Texans have never scored below 20 points or above 24 points. So I want to see if that trend continues tonight.
Mm.
Personally, I think Houston goes under that. I was thinking more of like a 27 to a 27 to 14 game or something like that. Which way do you lean, JB? Do you think there's 44 plus total points in this game? Now, I've mentioned that only 3 out of 12 games that these teams have played throughout history
No,
have had 44 plus points.
yeah, I don't see it.
If I were to take the over in this game, I would feel more comfortable at taking that at over 39.5 because, once again, these teams have gone over that in 8 out of 12 games. And then, Houston, they're 3-6-1 to the over. Buffalo's only 5-5. It's a primetime game. It feels like the primetime games are a little bit lower scoring. But once again, I said this at the start of the show. I wouldn't necessarily I mean, you can if you want, do so at your own risk. Tail what I'm talking about. Tail my picks, but um, this is really just information that you guys don't have to do work for. I mean, it took me a lot of time to come up with this information. It took you an hour to listen to it, guys. So you can digest this however you deem fit. But yeah, I can't go against that trend with Josh Allen there. And then, although we've seen, I mean, we just saw Andy Reid come off a bye week and lose to the Broncos. You know, we see crazy things happen all the time. So, and I wouldn't even consider this crazy if Houston won tonight. Like JB just mentioned, they need this game. They have a good defense. So, but yeah, my favorite anytime touchdown scores in this one are going to be James Cook. That's going to be my favorite one, and then Woody Marks. But I think another honorable mention is Nico Collins. Who do you feel like, JB, and maybe some Keon Coleman? for another honorable mention for Buffalo. But who do you feel like JB has the best chance getting in the end zone tonight? Maybe
Not Coleman. I don't know why I was laughing at that in my head. Oh boy. Nico Collins.
Mhm.
I like Nico. And probably a Doug Schultz
Dalton Schultz.
or Dalton Schultz. Yeah, Doug Schultz. Shout out Doug Schultz. Yeah. Um, yep.
I like that, Ivan.
Maybe a goal line, putt by Nick Chubb.
Okay, yeah.
You know, I don't know. With Millen, I mean, they're not like, it's obviously not their starter, so they got to survive off of other pieces as well, strengths, cover up weaknesses. So I see him kind of leaning on them guys. I know last week he kind of actually the team rallied around him. He picked him up and won it for him. So let's go Texans.
I would be truly surprised if Buffalo lost this game. I really would. Anything can happen any given Sunday, in this case, any given Thursday. But I feel pretty good about Buffalo getting this win. Covering, I would have to lean towards them winning this game by 6+ points as well. Final score prediction, yeah, I think it goes under. So what was I saying? 27 to 14. What's your final score prediction, JB?
Probably like a 14 20 Texans.
Ooh, you got the Texans winning this one.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for all of those. Bettors, what was on your mind? Your note to self? I think that was the explosive plays. Thank you for reminding me, Ivan. But it was the explosive plays. Neither of these teams have allowed a lot of 20+ or even 40+ yard receiving gains this season. That's why I think yards after the catch is going to be, and those possession receivers going to be a little bit more important today through the passing game for both sides of the ball, just kind of picking apart instead of going for that home run hit in the passing game. And then same with the rushing game, except I think there is a good chance that the rushing attack for Houston breaks away for bigger gains than Buffalo does. Now, James Cook, in my eyes, is a much better running back than Woody Marks and Nick Chubb. And I've seen James Cook defenses that were supposed to defend him well. But, just I'm a little unsure if he breaks out for big gains in this one because Houston has allowed the fourth fewest 20+ yard rushing gains this season, and Houston has allowed the fewest 40+ rushing yard gains this season. So, in that aspect, I'm a little worried about Cook breaking out for big gains at least. But I think he could eat away, pick up 6, 7 here and there. You know what I mean? But once again, I've seen this movie before, where James Cook, he's going up against a tough rush defense and he eats.
Oh, absolutely. But we've also seen it where, and just recently too, where they actually turn away from the run and put it in Josh Allen's hands, and he doesn't look so much like the MVP of last year.
Mm-hmm. But if you do feel like Buffalo wins this game, James Cook has more yards per carry in every season that he's played in when his team wins. And also he has more rushing touchdowns many more rushing touchdowns when his team wins than if his team loses. So if you're thinking about doing multiple plays in this one, I don't think it's a bad idea to maybe do a game script where you think Buffalo's going to win, and then a game script where you think Houston wins. So. And there are things that happen, and I probably haven't got to everything, but there are things that happen more times than not. Players have better statistics sometimes when their team loses than when their team wins. I didn't have a time to look up all of that information, but it's 11:40 a.m. Eastern time. You guys have a lot of time to still do some other research that I haven't had the time to listen to some other people give their takes on the game. So,
Another person, Ivan, that hasn't been talked about or spoken about is Joe Mixon. Where's Joe Mixon? I know he's injured, but you know what I'm saying. As far as he's only supposed to have a couple weeks, and then everybody it's like the Texans just swiped him underneath the rug and forgot about him.
I don't think Christian Kirk's in a terrible spot tonight. Over the 11.5 receiving yards. Like I said, he's gone over that in 4 out of 6 games this season. And then for those of you that like to do that alternate line, instead of taking it down, taking it up, he's gone over 20-plus receiving yards in the same amount of games this season. And then he's had, I looked it up earlier in the show, he's had 27-plus receiving yards in all 3 career games that he's played against Buffalo. So, and then the receptions, same thing. He's gone over the 1.5 receptions in all games this season. And he's had the 1.5, but he's had 3+ receptions in 4 out of 6 games this season. So, yeah, anyways, that's about all I have left to talk about here. JB, anything you wanted to say? All right. Well, I just want to say thank you to the supporters, subscribers, followers. We really appreciate you guys here at the Not Move podcast. Also, thank you to the BetUS, MyBookie.ag, Walmart.com, Open Goal, the MLB and NFL Pro Shops, and W Energy Drinks. I'm real selective in what I like to play, but we do have a guy in the Not Move podcast that offers picks for $9.99 per day, $49.99 per week. Southgate's parlays. Here he's pretty good at what he does. So if you're interested in that option is available. But other than that, good luck tonight, guys. Hey, thank you, Ivan. You are moved. I'm not moved. All right. Take care, everybody. I'll see you guys again on Sunday morning. And yeah, good luck out there. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.
This non-casual podcast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or reused without the authorized written consent of the Not Move Podcast Network. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.